The only safe way that I've seen where this can work is if the listing agent makes arrangements to share the commission that they've been approved for with the third-party negotiator. So basically, there's a sharing of the duties and the work that's done, and then that commission's shared. In this instance, the lender knows everything that's going on. The lender doesn't have anything to object to. And I think the reason that there's so much pushback from that is people are finding some lenders are a little difficult to deal with in this market, and there may be some additional work in trying to negotiate the terms. But if you want to avoid trouble, I mean, that would be the best way to handle it. You share your commission, and then there's no reason for anybody to ask any questions about what you've done later on. And again, if you're going to make that sort of an arrangement, that's something you would want to describe in the MLS. That, for example, this is the commission that's been approved by the lender. This is what we're offering to any cooperating agent, and we will be using a third-party negotiator. They're going to take maybe, let's say, 1% of the total commission. And that way, there can be no questions later. It's all been fully disclosed. And the lender is not in any way being deprived of any extra money they might be entitled to. Now, over the last year or so, the real estate commissioner, Jeff Dawvey, has convened what he has called his broker supervision task force. And so he's brought in, I think, 8 or 10 people from the industry from all over the state, and they've met every few months to examine the issue of broker supervision. And what they now are going to be pursuing, and CAR has taken up the cause, they want to go in and actually have the law changed so that the broker of an office can actually delegate duties even to salespeople in the office in terms of management of that office. But that salesperson or that broker associate who's the designee will now become basically liable for the actions of the people that they supervise. And so in agreeing to do that supervisory role, you are taking on some sort of risk. I don't know if South Bay brokers will decide to maybe break up into smaller groups of to be managed by, let's say, maybe 10 agents managed by one licensee. But I mean, that is a scenario that is foreseeable if this law actually goes through and ends up on the books. Now, so that was kind of the main thing that came out of the broker supervision task force, because they were just concerned about these very large brokerages where there would be one broker in charge of maybe 1,000 agents. And then there was the problem, well, who actually is supervising those agents on a day-to-day basis? It's not reasonable to expect that one broker to be in contact with all those agents on a continual basis. So what can they do as an interim measure? And that's how they came up with this idea. Now, it also, though, led them to look at the issue of salesperson malfeasance or breaking of the rules, and the fact that a lot of brokers, when they would let salespeople go for one reason or other, if they would find that the salesperson had done something they weren't supposed to in a transaction, the Business and Professions Code required that to be reported to the Department of Real Estate. Most brokers were not reporting that. They were simply asking the agent if the agent would like to resign, maybe rather than be reported, and then that would be the end of the situation. But the task force decided that that was just passing bad apples down the road, and they wanted to actually have the law that's on the book be enforced. So I think most brokers, probably South Bay brokers included, are now going to report people if there's a problem, because what the DRE has said is if we find out that you did not report an agent after they were let go for cause, for breaking a rule of the real estate law, we will come back and we're going to audit that broker, and we're going to find out what role that broker may or may not have played in all of this. They're saying that they also are going to give the broker who does come forward a pass of a sort. They're saying we're only going to focus on the offending agent. We're not going to do what we've done in the past, which is to come in and launch a full-blown audit. We're actually going to give that broker the benefit of the doubt, thus the name of their program. Now, I call this to your attention because things that may have gone on in the past in terms of a broker giving an agent a pass, that's probably something that's going to be long gone. I think most brokers are taking this very seriously, and I think if, again, all the more reason just to try to do things by the book. If you have any questions about a transaction, you're not sure what the right call is, I think it's good to go into the broker, have a talk, maybe ask to talk to the brokerage's risk management attorneys before you commit to a particular pathway in a transaction. The other thing that I will mention regarding the Broker Supervision Task Force, and this became kind of a pet project of mine, and it's been discussed at the task force, but I've now presented it to CAR, and that is that the Department of Real Estate add to their regulations and rules that in a situation where there's been a minor violation by a licensee, that the department would have the ability to write basically what we would call a fix-it ticket. There'd be a citation and then a fine paid. It would not become license discipline against the licensee. This would be for something that's a minor problem, hasn't caused any loss to a consumer, there's no financial harm, and if you've never been investigated by the department or you've never had any dealings with them, this may sound like it's maybe not necessary and why should we be giving anybody a pass, but the fact is people sometimes do find themselves at the focus of an investigation really through just a simple mistake on their part, maybe just not handling a complaint correctly. And the ability for the department to issue one of these citations to somebody, allow the person to just pay a fine and be done with it and not have this show up on their license history, this is a really big deal for the industry. A lot of the other licenses are offered in the state to other professionals allow for this. And the Department of Real Estate is one of the really only licensing agencies that doesn't have the ability to do this right now. So what we're hoping is that in the early new year, CAR is going to, right now they're looking for a legislator to sponsor this. And once it gets in the works, what I may do is be sending around emails which Jim and Jack can pass on to everybody. And if you like this idea, I encourage you to contact the assembly person who's going to sponsor the bill, contact your local assembly person, and speak up and say this is something that you think is really good for the industry. Now, going further with the short sale situations, I had mentioned that you can find yourself in trouble if you're just one of the parties to a transaction where something has not been right. This could lead to, example, federal investigation. And as I mentioned, the federal statutes are very long. The federal statute for a lot of crimes is actually 10 years. I've actually dealt with people who 9 years after they did something wrong, they found the FBI on their doorstep. And typically in the real estate related crimes, they will charge people with wire fraud or mail fraud. It's very kind of all-encompassing sort of idea. If you did anything in a real estate transaction, they can fit it into wire fraud or mail fraud, and then they usually will add to that a conspiracy charge because nobody's doing any of this stuff all by themselves. Usually a group of people have been involved. And so those two statutes are generally the charges that people are facing. And they will look into things like, and some of the hot schemes right now are reverse mortgage fraud. And that can involve one person a straw buyer purchasing a piece of property, then shortly after that reselling it to another person. They get inflated appraisals. The second straw buyer goes in, gets a reverse mortgage, takes out a lump sum rather than starting just a stream of payments. takes the lump sum, no payments are made, everybody disappears. And then credit enhancement can be people making deposits in somebody's bank account, making it look like they've got more funds on hand than they actually do. There's a case that I'm aware of in Northern California currently where there was a gentleman who bought, I think, 8 pieces of property within a 6-month period. All the properties were $1 million or more. A lot of them were in the Lake Tahoe area. And every time he was being scrutinized by the lender, the mortgage broker and some of her colleagues would put several $100,000 into this man's bank account. And then that money would be drawn out again after the transactions closed. He's under federal indictment. The mortgage broker's already taken a plea bargain. The selling, the broker, this buyer's broker, had nothing to do with any of the representations made to the lenders, did not touch any of that paperwork, never saw it. That broker's under federal indictment and is also a target of the DRE. And then, of course, foreclosure rescue, going in and telling people you can help them out. And this often will involve asking for some advance fees from people. People who have literally they don't have a penny left will, scrape together some money and pay, somebody who holds himself out to be a foreclosure rescue expert. And then the person takes the money, tells the homeowner, stop making your house payments, we're handling it, or make those payments to us and we're going to take care of everything. And of course they don't. And there's, when that happens to somebody, there's no recourse really. The scammer's long gone, and the homeowner, maybe that little bit of money they could have put together to get themselves into a rental property or something is all gone, and they're left with nothing. Of course, serial flipping, which is something that we're seeing in the short sales. Something that I've heard I've gotten a lot of calls about this actually. A party will go in, make an offer on a short sale, get it accepted. There's usually something funny's gone on in terms of convincing the lender that the property's worth less than what the actual fair market value is. The ostensible buyer will tie the property up. They'll get approved, tie it up at a certain price, and then, and also these buyers tend to claim to be all cash buyers. And then suddenly the all cash buyer doesn't have their cash available. And so they say to the listing agent, I can't go forward, but I would sell my position, and the typical amount to sell the position is $100,000. So again, that would be a significant loss to the lender, and anybody involved in that later on could find themselves with not only, the DRE in these kind of situations is frankly the least of your problems. The DRE cannot put you in jail. But it's the FBI and the other people that become a problem. So be okay. So, on top of the other stuff that I've mentioned to you, it does really seem at the moment the DRE is most concerned about people misbehaving with short sales, but Jim did bring up something interesting when he was speaking. He said that, do you remember subdivisions? And it's true, all of the subdivision deputies except for 1 or 2 have been moved into the Department of Real Estate's enforcement section to pick up the slack and handle this overabundance of complaints.
They didn't do any layoffs, did they?
No.
Yeah, I just want to confirm that.
No, there's no layoffs. There is no activity in subdivisions at all. And so they've taken those people, they have moved them, and I guess if you get a subdivision deputy investigating you, maybe that's better because maybe they won't investigate as well as the more seasoned people. But they have been able to increase their numbers, and really, as I mentioned, it used to be things might sit on a deputy's desk for, a complaint might sit there for a year, 2 years. From time of complaint until my client, might get a phone call or a letter asking for some information, now it could be less than a month.